Good morning, everybody. It is June 13th, Sunday morning. I got up really early, so I went out and it's going to be hot, so I went out and did all the watering, soaked all of the roses and the plants, and hopefully they won't wilt too much today under the stress of all the heat. I found an album that I had worked on back, when was this, 1975. That had a much deeper story to it than I ever really realized when we had done this. It's an artist named Bob Carpenter, and he did an album called Silent Passage. Now, this is probably one of the most convoluted projects that I've rediscovered. Here, I'm going to start reading some things. I'm going to do some more reading. There's an incredible amount of information about this guy that probably almost nobody's ever heard of in here. The album was produced by Brian A. Hearn, who I did a lot of work with, and he I think did the Emmylou Harris Hot Band and all kinds of projects together. And the cast of characters on this is really strong. It's myself and Russ Kunkel on drums. The great Lowell George is on here. Bob Carpenter himself playing guitar. Billy Payne from Little Feat. Brian Ahern also played. Anne Murray is on this. Diane Brooks. Ben Keith playing steel. Emmylou Harris is on this. And Milan Kimlicka, I think is his name, it did the string arranging. But this album never got released until much later. I believe he had an altercation over contracts and with the record company and this whole thing. Basically, this is all demos. This album ended up being demos of his songs. Now, he was born in North Bay, Ontario, in Canada, and in 1945. So these songs, I'm just reading my copious notes that I've taken, but it says these songs were originally demo tapes that we did, and then he had a falling out with the label, and the album was shelved for many years and finally released as is, Silent Passage. Really, it's a story album, and it's one of those albums that should be listened to from song one through to the very end because they all link together on it. But I started reading this guy's bio in here, and it's really unbelievable. I mean, let me just tell you. This guy wrote, like this guy, I think he's for the Rolling Stone magazine, wrote a thing. He thinks it's like just unbelievable, and he just goes on and on and on in this thing. But it says things like, intimately entwined with his meditative music, Bob's religion always played a big part in his everyday life. His commitment to Buddhism only deepened over the years, sometimes at the expense of family. Eventually, he entered a monastery in California to prepare to become a monk, which he achieved simultaneously as he passed through this life in 1995 of brain cancer at the age of 50, a lifelong spiritual pilgrim to his last dying breath and the first new breath of life to come. Besides being an incomparable musician, Bill had an amazing gift to be able to conjure and combine complex Christian, Tibetan Buddhist, Sufi, and other homegrown Canadian Indian visions, projected them onto the movie screen of the mind, and made them instantly accessible and relevant to us then, today, and tomorrow. Through eloquent truth-telling and universal language of poetry, he makes listeners believe he is speaking directly at them when he is speaking to everyone. I thought he was speaking to me. It was such a private conversation. That's why Bob's journey and my journey and our journey and Silent Passage will endure as an Ultimate Seekers album, a star chart for soul guide of new generations and gypsies, wanderers and wayfarers searching for the light. But it goes on. A lot of his songs are about struggling with ego. His lyrics are taking the truth to which they resonate with people to a very deep level. They are about what religion, spiritual ideas are leading us towards. To me, it's very deep what Bob was writing about. It's got a lot to do with his spiritual quest. I'm just trying to see here. Bob was something of a purist when it came to his music and wasn't thrilled with the bells and whistles, horns, strings, backup singers Ahern brought in to fully illustrate his songs. Bob felt they were a form of hype, parlor trickery that detracted from the core essence. He was more comfortable sticking to the basics of the genre. At the same time, Ahern was much more than a shaper of sounds. He was a painter with an infinite canvas, array of brushes, and a palette of many colors and contrasts. And then he used all those to bring Bob's dramatic, panoramic song poems to a brilliant, spellbinding life. Ahern was always looking beyond the all-night studio sessions at the bigger picture of bringing Bob to the world, not just satisfying the folk country rock demographic. Taking nothing away from the integrity of Bob's music, Ahern's arrangements drew out the hidden lines of emotions and provided the kind of classic elegance, aura, and luminescence that framed timeless art. And it goes on talking all about this and says Ahern had already proved his hand at hit-making with Anne Murray's sparkling globe-circling Snowbird, and he surrounded Bob with world-class studio musicians to elevate the game. Lee Sklar, Lowell George, Bill Payne, Russ Kunkel, Ben Keith, Buddy Cage, Anne Murray, Emmylou Harris, Diane Brooks, among others who I've already mentioned. Wrote Ahern of the reissue of Silent Passage. I threw Bob into the deep end of the pool, knowing his great voice and aggressive hypnotic acoustic guitar style playing would infect them with equally powerful performances. Without Ahern's production, Bob had little patience for the recording process and felt his input was largely ignored. It's likely that few outside Canada would have ever heard of Bob's music, but Ahern understood Bob's talent, what his songs were about and where they were coming from, and he knew at this level of musicianship and how important he was as an artist and why it was so important to create a rich musical environment to nourish his mind-blowing song. So that's when we heard we could not, so that when they were heard, they could not be forgotten. I mean, it's just interesting. Bob's essential being was formed early in a crucible of abandonment, disconnection, and yearning. Part Ojibwe Indian, he was born March 12, 1945, on a reservation near North Bay, Ontario. His grandfather was Bill Guppy, who supposedly taught Grey Owl, the Englishman who pretended to be a Canadian Aboriginal, how to live in the wild, and his father was Ojibwe. This had been an influence on Bob. It goes on about his whole life. I mean, this is like pages of stuff. It talks about when he played at a festival in 1970, the legendary Festival Express tour train that had the Grateful Dead, the band, Janis Joplin, Delaney and Bonnie, Buddy Guy, Flying Burrito Brothers, Sha-Na Na, Ian and Sylvia, and they rolled across Canada into Calgary on the last stop of this 5-day rock and roll adventure. Rolling Stone reporter covered the festival, described this jaw-dropping, spontaneous appearance at the All-Star Send-Off. He said after the final festival in Calgary, a young guitarist mysteriously showed up at the York Hotel where the farewell party was taking place, and with the deep and painful voice of some ancient mariner, performed songs of unbelievable dignity. No one knew his name. He said, "Doesn't matter the kind of music I play, your mind sort of melts and becomes that one place of beautiful bliss, which is the only place to be." The young guitarist's name was Bob Carpenter, and his journey from Ancient Mariner to Silent Passage was well underway. He went to India and worked and connected with people. I mean, it's a really fascinating story. I mean, much more than almost everybody that I've read about and talked about during the course of all these videos. And it was off my radar, and then I suddenly found this. So if anybody's interested in this, just go back and Google up Bob Carpenter, the Canadian musician. And it's just, tragic when you think that all this was going on, and then he passed away so young. Let's see if there's any other. Let's see. They wrote, "One final bubble. I don't think it's a stretch to suggest that had Silent Passage been released on Warner Brothers in 1974, there would have been more albums after that, and Bob Carpenter would have been in the discussion as one of the great contemporary singer-songwriters of the 20th century. But that's just me wondering out loud, right? When I first heard these early demos in 1971, it was ridiculously obvious to me that nothing could keep Bob and Brent as well, for he was part of the ill-fated deal Brent has talked about earlier, from global success. Almost nothing, except for the trapdoors of the music business. We'll never know what might have been, and that's part of the tragedy. There was only one album, and that's all we have to go by. But what an album it is. Well worth waiting a couple of thousand years for. So I'm going to play a couple of songs that we recorded for this album that got shelved and then eventually released. This one is called The Believer. So this is Bob Carpenter, and this is, again, from 1975, and the album is called Silent Passage. Hold on, I got to get this other speaker going here. That's not going to work. Give me 1 second to hook up the techno side of things here. I walked away for a moment to feed the dogs, and this thing timed itself out. Sorry, techno world. There we go.
Can't imagine, that's my problem. I'm searching always for better weather. The coast is rough and the tide is running. I'll chase my shadow till I remember. Fighting 3 days have gone to storming. I spend my time with joy and sorrow, but one is dying and one is crying. I may not be around tomorrow. My dearest friends are total strangers. I call them heroes, they call me lonely. I wish them wisdom and self-destruction, and hope someday they'll come to know me. Forest grows around my door now, and I'm dreaming of a meadow where I may lie in frosty sunlight, far between the earth's gray shadow. Though I'm not a god for certain, there are steps that we all must follow. He's a beggar and a king babe. He's a falcon and a swallow. I can't imagine, that's my problem. I'm searching always for better weather.
Wow. You know, these, just the stories of people and what they've, the journeys that they've taken to create the music that they've created, and then running into the stone wall of the music industry, and then having your music shelved until, you know, somebody actually rediscovers it and re-releases it years later. It's an amazing journey. I was so fascinated reading his story. Here's a song called Gypsy Boy. Now the thing is, these were all supposed to be done in order. I'm just playing a couple of songs out of order, trying not to disrespect him for the way he chose to do this, but it'd be a long video if I played the whole album and talked about these things. But definitely one of the more interesting stories of all these hundreds of videos I've put up. This one really surprised me with the backstory to it. So worth checking out. So here's Gypsy Boy.
London circus with the wagon swinging slowly on a cold October morning, on a day that should be holy, winding through the forest as the sun is just a-breaking, and I'm only 7 and a gypsy in the making. Winds are blowing through me and the canvas collapses down, and the folks is talking low now, 'cause they don't want me to hear it. And Uncle says there's trouble with the bulls along the border, and I'm wondering why, and I'm wishing I were older. Many years ago it seemed to many summers ending, the wagon wheels is rusted and the axles is a-bending, and Grandma's bones is bleaching and our hearts is still a-dying. But I'm a gypsy boy and there ain't no time to cry. Now it's getting colder and the air is growing ugly, and the wolves is getting bolder, and there ain't no sun above me, and I think it's time to move now, but I don't know where we're going, and I know it won't be long now before it starts to snow. Ladies crying softly, and the women are sighing, and somewhere in the wagon there's a soul that must be dying, 'cause the paint is hanging black from the window of each lorry, and here lightly camp at sunset so the body can be buried. So the carts will rumble till there ain't no road to travel, and I listen to the grinding of the wooden wheels on gravel, and the sad songs and the old songs will warm me and will hold me till my head at last grows weary and the arms of sleeping hold me. For I am a gypsy boy and my home is where you find me. For I am a gypsy boy and my home is where you find me.
it's always interesting working on things like this, where they're so just lateral, just moves like that, and trying to keep it interesting, finding parts, because whenever we would come in on a session like that, it would just be person sitting and playing guitar and singing, and then you have to figure out what to do, and that's where you have, first and foremost, you respect the song, and you don't want to get in the way of the story that's being told in the song. And with things like this, it's really, boy, it is sparse, and just, that was a good thing working with Brian Ahern on it, was, knowing that we didn't need to put a lot of, as he had said, bells and whistles on it. You just wanted to have just some stuff just to add some color and texture, just to add a little bit, another dimension to it. Now here's the track that's this is the title track. This is Silent Passage. So again, 1975, kind of unreleased when it happened, Bob Carpenter album. There we go.
Before the war I had no need for traveling. Indeed, I do not know what made it so important to leave. And after all this time, I found that I'm avoiding need for nothing more or less than fear of what I have to gain from staying in the clear. Although it's only coming home that brings you near. Master John, my brother, is a sailor upon this ship of light. We are the master sailors in the wind, and you can understand we need a hand to guide us in. So many claim to be the one, but like the shadow on the sun, they fade and spin. And we are scattered on the ocean once again. Before the war I had no need for traveling. Indeed, I do not know what made it so important to me. And after all this time, I found that I'm avoiding me for nothing more or less than fear of what I have to gain from staying in the clear. Although it's only coming home that brings you near. Although it's only coming home that brings a tear.
Fidelity-wise, I think all of these YouTubes of this it sounded like they came off of recorded off of an album and not first generation. But I think there's one more song. I don't think I did this one. This is called First Light. It's going to have an ad.
As your small business changes,
Let me forget that, get rid of this commercial.
Far across the windy, wavy ocean, prepared for any weather. We sailed upon the sea, the magic ship and me, from the coast to where I've been, to where I think I'd rather be. First light of morning, an army I have gathered beneath the great mountain where all men upon, where Christ was a soldier, soon to be forgotten. And I have come the sword and heavy armor, where he was dressed in wonder. I have come to search for just an hour, where he's gone forever. The road is buried in tradition, the earth has lost another. She claims to be our mother, but she's just the eldest daughter. And her power is the mind and the craving of the body. And she has me, but the war is just beginning. My father stands before me. She has me, but I'm bound that I'll be winning. I know he won't ignore me. First light of morning, an army I have gathered beneath the great mountain where all men have fallen, where Christ was a soldier, soon to be forgotten. And I have come with sword and heavy armor, where he was dressed in wonder. Come to search for just an hour, where he's gone forever. Hey, hey, hey. Across the windy, wavy ocean, on a ship prepared for any weather, we sailed upon the sea, the magic ship and me, from the coast to where I've been, to where I think I'd rather be.
I mean, it just very reminds me a little bit of some of the work I did with Sean Phillips. But really a fascinating life. So if you're at all intrigued by this, Google him up, and it's quite a journey this guy took, and it's heartbreaking that he passed so young. But I was delighted to find this. There's so many things that I've done that aren't listed anywhere, and for some reason they'll pop up, from Anthony Newley to Conway Twitty to Andy Williams and stuff. I keep looking and looking for projects I've worked on. Some just aren't to be found. When I look at Wikipedia, it's about a 2/3 complete on there, half to 2/3 complete. But there's so many that still come back to mind. And so I've been going through these all kind of spark other ideas of things that I had done. And so I'm going to keep digging every day. This is, it's fascinating for me just to rediscover these people. So I'm going to wish you a wonderful rest of your day here on the weekend. I'm going over to my friend Marty Davich's house to work on a song that we're going to record later this week, and for a project. And then I have a Zoom interview tonight at 7 o'clock my time. I think it's up on my YouTube page. On my Facebook page. I don't have it in front of me right now. But let me see if I can pull this up and see if there's anything going on here worth. Let's see what we got. Hold on just a minute. Take a quick look. There's always... it's all too much crap on here to deal with. Nice picture of Phil of the Everlys. We have a gig coming up. They just advertised this. Peter Asher and Company at the Loft at City Winery in New York on July 26th, Monday, July 26th. We have a show there, and it's myself, and it's Peter Asher's show, but with Kate Taylor. We're going to be doing songs from her new album, and Albert Lee, and we're doing some stuff for him, and I'm there, and have a great group of musicians besides me on there. And so that's going to be a lot of fun. It's actually going to be a nice little about 10-day run. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm still looking for tonight's thing, and I'm not finding it here right now. So I am going to just say, have a wonderful day. You'll find it if it's whatever. And thank you again, all of you frontliners. Your weekends are spent saving lives, and there's nobody quite like you. So thank you so much. And I will see everybody tomorrow then. So have a great weekend. Bye-bye.